What is up, guys? Yahooz here, and I am finally giving my virtual sailing world championship analysis for this year. As we can see, we have the results right here. Congratulations to Disruptor, by the way, for dominating this fleet this year with a convincing performance of only 14 points, nearly having second place, who is Grix430 with 30 points. It appears to me everyone seemed to play scared and did really inconsistently. So I'm gonna see if I can point out some logical mistakes that people made and logical things that I found were good and bad decisions made by everyone this regatta. I originally said that I was going to only do an analysis for like top three and top three of each race, but I think I'm going to go freeform because it's really just too hard to keep track of at this point. So let's follow who did well this first race. I'm trying to remember. Let's follow Doggy 4. He gets 7th for this regatta, but in this race I think he has very good ideas. I will point out his one mistake on this upwind. But overall he has pretty good ideas this race, if I recall correctly. So far we have a current advantage outright, shift of -5 in this case, which is interesting because you probably want to start mid here from first glance. But we're going to see why that changes pretty quickly. I'm pretty sure this blob right here starts to shift to the left side right here, and that makes this left side more enticing to start on. And we're going to see how this pans out in the starting sequence. Let me refocus on Doggy 4 here. Okay, so now we're going into this whole sequence. Doggy 4 and Zagaya are fighting for that upmost lane, but keeping also pretty safe, leaving a lot of runway. I don't like what Maz does here. He could probably just chill in this area, maybe with James, and try to block off James and Magnus, and then maybe try to slowly approach if he really wanted to commit to pin. I guess what he does here is okay, so as long as he can hold this lane. Meanwhile, we have 3 boats seeming to fight out for the pin a lot. Only one of them is really going to make out alive at this rate. See, Jonah is already attacking out. And we have the start sequence. That's a very good start by Dogi. Not sure how he wasn't OCS there, but I mean, hey, I didn't see anything. So right now, as it stands, even though it's shifted back 1 degree, as you can see here, let me put this back. Sorry. Even though it's focused back 1 degree, Dogi 4 can still attack out a lot here, and we're going to see why this is a mistake later on. Because notice how this current's pushing out left, right? So if they go too far out, then we're just going to travel extra distance. So now Dogi, I think he was a little scared. This is an example of people being scared this race, because he definitely could attack over T-Dogs here, but opted to attack after T-Dogs attack, playing the very, very safe option. Even though he could attack over T-Dogs and maybe let James and Zagaya go. And this becomes a pretty bad situation for him because he has to, he's overlaying, he has to bear down because of this current. Notice how he's already losing on T-Dogs and Fishcat here because he has to bear down so much. And he has to bear down even more coming into this mark. Fishcat there does something interesting. I actually want to rewind that. So fish cat's here, and what he can do is tack over, right? Which he does right here. Now, this kind of forces T-Dogs to tack. This is a very sharp angle to duck at. So T-Dogs is going to have to tack at this point. But the way Fish Cat plays this is a little questionable to me. So what he does is that he tacks, then tacks right back. T-Dogs appears to go for the dip anyway, which I find very curious. I think Fish Cat wasn't trying to go overlay, but if he wanted to take out T-Dogs, he would just stay and then maybe tack over him. But what T-Dogs does, he has good reactions and heads back up, right? And that I think this will affect. It was a good move still, I think, actually, because Fish Cat will push T-Dogs overlay and he'll still won't be able to get Mark Bloom on Fish Cat. But if Fish Cat wanted to play it even safer, he could have just waited a little bit longer and tacked on top of T-Dogs and gained an easy first, although this current pushes T-Dogs out, so. And as we can see, Doggy 4 barely getting inside, masterful tack. A lot of people underestimate the power of luffing your sails while going into the windward mark, excuse me. It allows you to, luffing on and off allows you to oftentimes control your speed. And people don't necessarily think about the implications of that. And I think, as far as I remember, the rest of this race is pretty standard. Left shift, so obviously the left gate is the correct choice. Even though there's wind forming out there, it's a continuous left shift, excuse me. So, plus they enter the wind later anyway, so they get a little glimpse of it. So course left was definitely a dominant theme that race, whether it be due to wind or shift. I like how Doggy 4 played the course, except for maybe overlaying a little bit. I think his opportunity would be to tack out earlier and try to cross T-Dogs. In fact, he would cross T-Dogs, but crossing T-Dogs would definitely benefit him and allow him to gain clear advantage, because I think James and Zagaya were well overlay if he tacks out. If he tacks out onto lane and they're overlay, then he'll definitely get Mark Bloom on them. So, interesting first race, to say the least, and we will follow that up with a more interesting second race, at least in my opinion. So what happens here is we have cats, and we have a clear current difference, right? This is going to be pretty notable later on, right? So, I mean, obviously course center it's a parabolic function in terms of current here. So, you're having, as you go farther out right, you have less beneficial current, and as you go farther out left, you have more beneficial current going upwind. And we're going to see how current kind of dominates this race, at least in my opinion. We can already see that the shift is -11, which is very enticing for the pin end. People want to start there. Very good spot to try to start at. I'm also going to follow along with Doggy for this race, because I also believe he does well. Maybe not. Actually, I'm going to follow with Flo, because Flo is pretty good at pin starts. And so what he does here is that he sets up at a very narrow angle. You think he might not make lay here, but this current is pushing right, very far out right, so he knows pretty much what it's going to do to him. Now this is interesting as well, because we got Disruptor coming up here, and Disruptor's already passing under Tinker Sailor, so that kind of gives... Flo kind of has the idea, he's warning him about the thin lay, trying to dissuade him from going, but it's kind of clear that Disruptor kind of wants that pin end, and then gets a pretty nasty poke onto him. Flo tacks out. It appears the Disruptor breaks Rule 15, because as he became overlapped Flow didn't have room to avoid him properly. But even as Disruptor spins, by doing so, by making Flow tack out, after he spins, he has the advantageous position. You want to be out left, so he has the hook on Flow, has more runway space, and will definitely lay the pin at this rate. So I'm actually going to follow along with Disruptor and see how this pans out. See how Flow has the luff, and Disruptor can sort of just keep his momentum going to the start, and pretty much has a perfect start. Not really perfect, but very good for that situation. Almost forcing Flow into his windward shadow, and has this last little pop of wind there. So what winds up happening is, as we noticed, it was a negative 11 at the beginning of the pre-start, negative 9 at around 1 minute or so, and now it's negative 6. So we obviously have a right trending shift. So that's going to benefit a lot of these guys. But, as I mentioned earlier, we have much better current out here. It's like going to push these guys up. So, despite the fact that these guys will have starboard advantage with a right shift coming up this beat, especially Moz here, who makes the most of it in my opinion, overall, the left guys are still going to be benefited. Mostly because the tendency is for the fleet to tack out underlay because they're not accounting for the current enough. Something I find with Salix is that when push comes to shove, the fleet consensus is to go on what they think is lay in accordance to these lines, not necessarily what the true lay is with the current and other factors in play. And this kind of creates a little interesting scenario because with this current difference, we have it so that if one of these guys tacks out, then these guys can tack out and cross everybody, right? So it kind of has this staircase effect. But as we can see, right, most guys are going to catch most of these people. So it's kind of a game of chicken almost, like whoever tacks out later will ultimately be benefited. You can see Luxing, Flow, and Disruptor, they stuck with it, and despite facing a right shift, were able to get out alive. And so, as we go up the beat, the wind starts to oscillate a bit, and this is important, right? You'll notice the oscillations will go to 4 to 7, 4 to 7, 3 to 6, 3 to 9 actually. Okay, so it's oscillating between that range, right? So it's not trending right, it's oscillating but favored right. And so what everyone does, at least what the first 4 boats do, is make a very interesting decision. They all decide to go for this right gate, which is interesting. You can see right outside of this right gate, you've got current pushing down, and if they want to not tack out early, they would have to go more into this current, right? We get a huge current difference here as opposed to here, especially during the upwind here. I'm going to preface this with saying, I know what happens in this race, but despite the fact of what the shift winds up doing and what the wind winds up doing, I would still probably go course left in this case, just because the wind is oscillating between the same lane, so it's not like there's any gains to be had from going to the right side, plus you're getting continuous gains from going out left, right? So I'm actually going to focus on Moz here, because he's the first person to catch on to that. Right, so he goes out course left, which seems like a bold move, really. But you can see Disruptor has to tack out early, because he kind of sees what's coming. And these guys go out farther right. Kind of trap themselves, and actually they don't. They try to tack out early, once again. They see this new wind coming in up here. Moz, I think, might have tried to separate himself from the gate, and try to make games by going to this left side. I'm not so sure if he had the same thought process as me, but he's in luck now because of all this wind coming up. So we're going to see, he rounds the gate after cruise, loops him in flow, and look how much gains he makes from this, right? Attacks over, and see, like, obviously the shift shifts more in his favor, right? But look how much he gained over these guys, right? He rounded the gate after these guys. So I think even without the wind and shift, he'd still be making gains on at least cruise, I feel like. If not all these guys. I think everyone's scared and attacks out early here. Like if they weren't to attack out early, they would just be in this current, and even without the wind and shift, they have to attack at least 2 extra times, which is slow. So that's also something you have to account for. Alright, so that's a pretty interesting scenario. You're not only choosing your gate based on what the conditions are doing, but you also have to base your choice based on what you're going to wind up doing if you go the other gate, right? Because you don't want to attack 2 extra times and cast. That's really slow by any metric. So Oz actually winds up gaining a lot. Doesn't win the race, but goes from I think 5th to 2nd, something like that. He says it wasn't a risk. I don't know. I'll have to ask him what his thought process was behind that. But I know that it was similar, at least to mine. Okay, so let's go to the 3rd race. Now, from what I've gathered, nothing really interesting happens this race. Of course, I didn't really keep track of what the scores were at this point, so I don't know how important everything was. I'm going to once again follow along with Disruptor, because he does well this race. As we can see, standard pin start conditions, negative 11 degree shift, hasn't really changed since the pre-start, and lots of current, better current out left at least. So Disruptor has a good lane. I would be really scared of Old Nick, but James kind of dips there and dissuades Old Nick from stealing Disruptor's lane, so he kind of gets pretty lucky there. Pretty fortunate circumstance for him. And also Disruptor has nice inherent advantage. Well, okay, the standard thing for a boat like Fishcat to do there is to roll over the rest of the fleet, so if that were to happen, Disruptor would have an inherent advantage going off the starting line, but he decides to retire. I figure in a regatta like Worlds, like that, there'd be a different outcome to that. Fishcat would keep going and try to exonerate himself without retiring. But it turns out he does what many would call the correct thing here. So Disruptor attacks early. I don't necessarily agree with that. I don't necessarily agree with any of these early attackers, although Disruptor kind of has enough of a leg up on these boats that he can kind of afford to do that, mostly because there's better current out here, and yes, it's starting to shift back right. You can see it's now -9. But you're also going to start getting an attacking duel with these guys, and will ultimately start to lose some ground on these boats who have better current and I think a little bit better wind as well. And we're going to see just how much the attacking duel affects Disruptor. I believe he starts out way ahead of Jonah, and then like Jonah basically lead out him. And here's why I think Disruptor deserved to win the regatta, making very precise movements like that. I'm not so sure if that was just like, and here again, like he just does very precise maneuvers to get out to the now favored right side, because of course it's now -6, so right's starting to look good. So if I were Disruptor, I would have waited a little bit on this left side a little bit more, then tacked out maybe. Maybe checking out right at the start. I don't know. It's actually a little tricky, so I don't blame him for his choices there. But like for example, Jonah's going to come in right and threaten his position. Disruptor with a little bit of a preemptive tack is now that gives Jonah an advantage, right? Because if he attacks, then like he's risking rule 15. I would have held out a little bit more just to be a little safe there. Right, because we're seeing all these guys with the current like are gaining on the boats that haven't been in the current as much. Now here's a protest situation. I believe this got resolved. I don't know the outcome of that protest though. That might be something you guys can explore on your own. I might like link the protest in the description if I'm feeling up to it. Right, because before he was not able to cross Old Nick, but now that he spent more time in the current than Old Nick did, despite the now -3 shift, he was able to cross Old Nick pretty cleanly there. Right, and then he tacks in. Tacks very early there. I actually want to go back to that. So he tacks really early. What I assume this is to lessen his distance and close off himself to the mark and threaten these guys to not barge. And what he can also do is luff up safely because the current's pushing him away from the mark. But I feel like he could be just as effective if he tacked just onto lay. If he tacked over lay, then that would be an issue. But here, it's a little slow getting around the mark, I think, especially since Jonah can kind of tack, like, right, maybe not right there. I don't know. I feel like it would just be a little bit more effective if he went onto lay and didn't have to round the mark really slowly. But nevertheless, he defends his position, so nice job by him there. And I think there's an interesting downwind coming up between at least Tinker Sailor and Flow. Tinker Sailor doesn't pursue Flow here, which I don't agree with. I mean, obviously the right gate's going to be favored coming to this beat. So you want to get out right? Plus there's less current out here, dissuading you from going downwind. But the people that are going to get out right are definitely going to beat out Tinker Sailor here, as we're going to see. I don't like how he doesn't cover Flow in that regard because he immediately gives up control of or threats of Mark Rune, right? He gives all of that up and kind of concedes that all over Flow. Because now he's way overlay for that mark. Unless if he wants left gate, which would be interesting because I feel like right gate here just a little favored. But maybe they just see more wind out here. The wind increment isn't too detrimental. I mean, with this shift, I would like right gate here, but I think these guys see something out here that I'm not seeing. It'd probably be easier to tell on my 3D client whether this current difference is actually worth it or not. It's not exactly to scale on here. What's more is that Flow also played that really smart. He didn't try to go for inside room on Tinker Sailor early. He just kind of let it play its course and kind of judged that he would be able to get past Tinker's wind shadow with enough room for him to round the mark cleanly. And then this is pretty standard. Everyone likes this left gate. They're all following Flow, Tinker Sailor, like the race leaders, I think. And now it's shifting back left. So Yeah, I don't know what they saw, but I guess it worked out. Oh, well, the wind difference is definitely bigger now. See, this is why I would need my 3D client to really tell like what the real difference is here. It's a little harder to tell with this race replay. So yeah, they definitely made a good choice then. But Tinker Sailor definitely going over lay. I actually want to go back because I think Disruptor could have passed Tinker Sailor there. Let's see. Okay, so we actually have an interesting situation. So Pixel's heading up Jonah. Disruptor attacks right into it, which I don't agree with because I think Pixel's still going to control him if they push him over lay out here, right? So yeah, he jogs back. But I think if he just stayed and didn't stay in that wind shadow for so long, he could have started covering Tinker Sailor and looked for maybe a pass to second. Right, but I like the decision to like go this way of Pixel just because he's clearly very preoccupied in keeping up Jonah and isn't really interested in sailing quickly to a line. He's more concerned about conserving his fourth place. He's not thinking about how to pass simultaneously because Jonah's right there and is kind of this intimidating presence and nearby threat. Okay, and then race 4. So far, these races have been relatively standard. People have just not been starting consistently, I think. There's a lot of emphasis on conservative starts here, and people tend to play it too safe to the point where they were not looking for what the favored sides were and where the course was better and where it was worse. Although these conditions are tricky. I mean, I've been second guessing myself in this analysis so far, so it's certainly rough conditions, but solvable nonetheless. So who do I want to follow here? I'm going to follow Disruptor because he wins the battle. Where is it? Gotta find him. Yikes. Yeah, there you go. I didn't really get to see his pre-start here, but he definitely has a lane, that's for sure. Fastest guess could definitely head up a little bit more here, but might risk breaking goal 16. And he has a good start. I like mid just because you can see this blob he's kind of in the center of this blob and he's gonna push these guys out the outside of the blob where it's lighter. But meanwhile he also has like options because these guys are all gonna tag out soon because of the right shift. So I think these guys are going to see that these guys are going out right, and enough of them are going to go out right, so they're going to try to cover them. At least BAR does. Cruz, I think, waits a little longer, but this works out well for Disruptor. Because as we can see, it starts to shift back a little bit. Very tricky. And that gives him a pretty big advantage over the rest of the fleet. Something I want to talk about here is that, sure, like, these guys are inside of Disruptor, and appear to be ahead of him. Disruptor has room to attack and dissuade them from approaching on port. So we're going to see that Disruptor actually is leading them around the mark, right? Kind of just forces them into making very aggressive plays. And this is how you kind of win a race as disruptor, right? Like all the other guys kind of mess with each other, and you just come around the outside and just pass over everyone like a ninja. So yeah, pretty standard start, pretty standard game plan. Well executed, tack onto the mark. I typically like tacking onto around 6 boat lengths just so I can get that kind of position that Disruptor had there to dissuade any boats coming in on port, but also having enough room to tack to do so, you know. So he pretty much winds up winning this race. So nothing else to comment on the part of Disruptor, I suppose. Obviously, with this negative 6-degree shift, the left side is favored. And yeah, pretty standard stuff. At least from the perspective of how you win that race, really. I mean, obviously, boats could have held Disruptor out a little bit longer, but I still think that Disruptor had good advantage, like good positioning, because he was pretty punched out, and even if you're overlay in bigs, it's not too much of a problem. Definitely something you can make up for. I think everyone else was like a little bit too overlay. His only issue would be the boats that kept him out, pushed him out, overlay, and that's when you would want to maybe consider ducking. But yeah, a pretty general idea of what to do there is kind of just stay out of people's way the first beat, and do well. You know, if you duck at the correct time, even if you're ducking and trying to come back to the mark on port, even if you do that and leave yourself enough space to tack onto people, then if you duck right and tack onto people, then you actually have the advantage because people are going to be more swayed to tack themselves, especially with the right side current there, right? I hope this is making sense to you guys. Okay, last race. Also, I think pretty standard, although I'm not sure who does well this race. So I'm just going to focus in on the start line here. 5-minute start. Don't agree with that. Okay, so we see it is a 2-degree shift, lots of wind outright, and despite the current difference, actually this is more interesting than, this is a tricky race. We can see that it just turned -3, so my view, maybe going for shift would be smart here, because there's really big current difference. I'd say even bigger than race 2, arguably. The only issue if you're going out pin is getting caught, because people will tend to tack and be overlay if they push you out. So that's the only risk. Maybe starting middle would be appropriate. I don't know. Once again, it's one of those things where I would need my client to really gauge the nuances of this situation. But I'm curious to see who does well this race, because I actually don't know. I didn't really look at the results enough, or the race enough to tell. So, 3, 2, 1, boom. Okay. Now it's a -4. This wind over here started to die out, which I'll probably see. So these guys are definitely going to have the advantage now. So guys like Flo, Lukeson, actually I don't even know where Flo went. Yeah, but guys like Lukeson can almost tack out here. I think he will actually. Try to cross the Disruptor. Yep, there he goes. Now, if he didn't use spacebar to luff up there, instead of if you use enter, he would be able to cross Old Nick cleanly. Instead, Old Nick kind of has to duck him, which is a little sketchy. Old Nick can protest him for that, but chooses not to. Right? And so, once again, the guys out here are going to get continuous gains, especially since now it's a negative 10-degree shift. So, a lot of the, I think the biggest theme of this regatta was trending shifts and oscillating shifts, and people didn't seem to catch on to the trends. Like Lucen here, he's kind of just playing mid, but the guys that are aware of it are playing left and are gaining that advantage over him. So we're going to see as we come into this mark here. Like Lucen was pretty much ahead of everyone, but now, like, he was ahead of Old Nick, but now Old Nick's ahead of him, just because he played left more. Right? So something that you guys should be aware of watching those trends, especially the pre-start. The pre-start is usually a good tell of what will happen the rest of the race. Kind of gets penalized by DER there, unfortunate. Let us leave him into shame and focus on, I think, the race winner, which is Jonah, once he screws up. So Jonah is one of those guys that played left pretty solidly. I actually want to go back a lot and see what he did to get around that mark first. So he's out here on left, gets this nice little puff here, and I feel like he would tack sometime soon is to not let Zagaya get advantage over him. Let's see what he does. I think he sees these folks tacking and maybe tacks with them. No, he holds. That's very interesting. Okay, no, he tacks there, but I would have gone for attack much sooner. But I guess he has enough space. I think that the puff would have helped him. And then he pushes Zagaya kind of overlay. So Zagaya has to duck and he gets punched out by him. And then Zagaya himself has to slow down, so that gives him the advantage. Very interesting choices by Jonah, but it works out. And downwind was also really interesting. Between Old Nick and so Disruptor obviously the regatta leader at this point, I think, with this potential for. But we see there's a little right shift coming in, so Doggy I think catches on to that and goes to the right gate. First these guys try the current here and go out left. Disruptor makes a nice maneuver inside of Zagaya and gains that advantage. But unfortunately for them, I think. Oh, and Zagaya I guess left him up. But unfortunately for them, Doggy Fort has made a few gains for this right side. And just like that, now it's starting to shift back left. Of course, Jonah right here doesn't care. He's well ahead of everyone. Nothing too interesting about this. I guess the shift oscillates a little bit. It maybe 10's right, actually, at this point. But Jonah kind of digs into this current and wind and kind of extends his lead a little bit. So nothing to really worry about on that front. Disruptor makes a smart choice here. Seemingly tacking underway, but oh, he touched the buoy anyway. But I feel like he could have bluffed a lot more there. Maybe he was gone by the buoy too. Let me double check to see if that was the case. Okay, so no, he doesn't tack on into the zone here. I think. Kind of, sort of. Yeah, I don't like tacking in the zone, which is why I said like 6 foot lengths, just because I'm not in the zone. I don't have to think about this kind of stuff. But if you were outside the zone and just sort of were there, he could have left up a little bit and made the mark, just because, once again, I'm pushing away from the mark. Common mistake that people tend to forget is how the current affects your mark roundings, especially at the rim of the mark. Always something important to keep into account there. I think he also, gets very, very, very impatient. Like, he's won the regatta at this point, but by a very clear margin, and is just hitting buoys. So even Disruptor feeling the nerves here. And what should have been like a third place finish for him. Like, he's saying nice with a frowny face, but even so, he's still winning the regatta. Well done, whoever has now won. Like, he clearly does not know. It's like, even if I lose the protest. I don't know. Very anticlimactic. I mean, I wasn't there for the scoring race by race, so I don't really have too much insight on what kind of prospect, like what was on the line each race, but it kind of seemed like Disruptor. I was following around with him a lot of the time, so it seemed like he had pretty much full control of the regatta. And that's pretty much what I have to say on that. I haven't really looked into other people and tried to figure out where they went wrong with their consistency. But I focus on Disruptor, and Disruptor has had, I would say, probably the most good ideas next to Doggy and probably Flo. Even though Doggy and Flo placed like 6th and 7th, they still had probably some of the best ideas. Maybe not the best execution. I feel like Doggy probably had maybe some Cuban, some penalties here and there. Maybe Flo did as well. That's what cost them some places. But other than that, they have like the 1-3. Doggy has the 2-2. Disruptor obviously the 1-3, 1-9, I guess. But everyone else is sort of finishing like not top 3, maybe top 3, but like maybe like top third of the fleet, and managing to pull out top 5 places in the regatta. Right? So, interesting dynamic, this regatta. I mean, we saw something similar where 4th place and beyond were like 30 something plus points, but this is a whole new curve in which like only first was able to make it out with some decently consistent results. Okay, so that concludes this analysis. I wouldn't call it much of an analysis. It was pretty straightforward, but nevertheless, I hope this helped you in some way. I didn't really script this at all. I just sort of been saying what was on my mind as I went along. So I hope it helped you. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.